Julian, do you have anything?
I was about last control that requires fear, but without
Well, your question is very much related to Kendra's question about desire and fear and control. And bringing spirit to a life that lacks meaning, lacks excitement, passion. You should major in finance and philosophy. You shouldn't just major in finance. That would be a life not well lived. So, before we can talk about Stoicism, because remember, Stoicism is an outcome of being a human being and consequently being toyed by a world, forces, events that don't really care much for you. And then you put your hopes in certain things and you exercise a good amount of control in hopes that what you desire will come true, only to realize it doesn't. And then frustration comes in, and then confusion comes in, and then you really get angry at life for not giving you the things you want, and then you get angry at yourself for having invested too much of yourself into life, and life doesn't care. And so you become a stoic. You say, since life is not going to care for me, I'm not going to care for life. And you exercise a sort of detachment where, I don't know, you can call it like a Buddhist way of living, where you live inside life, but you're not part of it. So before we can talk about Stoicism, let's just talk about, what makes us, I think, so weak and vulnerable in the midst of life. It has to do with our organism and the way it functions. Before we talk about desire, fear, stoicism, control, let me tell you a story. It comes from one of my good friends, and you should forgive me for plagiarizing. There was a book written some years ago by a man who had a teacher. His name was PD Ouspensky. He was Russian, mathematician, like you and you, finance and economics. But there was also something inside him that was haunting him. Every morning he would wake up, he would ask, does my life have meaning? And despite, being relatively privileged, money-wise, and he lived a relatively comfortable life, and he was famous, he would travel to see if other people, other cultures, had answers to the yearning that lived inside him. So he had gone to India and he had met some teachers there, some students there, but they didn't smell right. So he went back to Russia. And then one day he heard that there is this guy who's giving talks, and he sounded relatively interesting. And the guy who was giving talks was Gurdjieff, half Armenian, half Russian, I guess, or maybe not. And so he worked with Gurdjieff for, I think, about 7 years, if I'm not mistaken. And Gurdjieff was a difficult man to work with. Before the two of you came in, my good young friend and I had a conversation about what it takes to be a good writer. And after maybe 20 minutes of rambling on, as I do because I'm ridiculous and old, I stopped myself, looked at him, and I said, advice is cheap. And it's such a true thing. If you really, really, really want to be a good writer, but you're not because of maybe life circumstances, maybe you're just lazy, maybe you don't have the passion, maybe you don't have the will. If I really, really liked you, and if I was proficient in my job, I would probably invite you to the house, have you slowly like me, then to some extent have you love me, where you become attached. Then I would turn your life upside down. Then you start feeling things that you've never felt before. And that would create a good amount of confusion. At times you would feel as if you're going insane. But because I was the one who created this insanity inside you, I did in a very controlled way. I broke you exactly the way I saw fit. And then while you're in the midst of going through your chaos, I'd give you a notepad and a couple of pens, and I would say, okay, now sit in the corner and write. And it's what they call automatic writing, in the sense that you have such intense emotions inside you and they're just erupting. And you're trying to capture this eruption by your pen and a piece of paper. And for the first time you begin to write, you try to capture your emotions, put them in this thing called language, words. And you keep writing and then erasing, writing and erasing until you get it right. And for the first time you understand the difficulty of writing, how meaningful it can be, how much of who and what you are it can capture. Whether or not other people understand what you went through by reading your writing, that's a different stage you have to be in. So I guess what I'm trying to say, if you really want to understand something, someone needs to take an interest in you and then put you in a very, very safe, comfortable, controlled, and frightening environment. And that person keeps pushing you and pushing you and pushing you until you break. But when you break, you can't run away. You're stuck there. You know, it's kind of like you may have a disagreement with your father, with your mother, but you love him. You hate them at that moment. And you run to your bedroom, all of a sudden you hear something loud, and you run into the kitchen and it's your mom. And all of a sudden, that moment where you felt so angry and you had so much hate for her, they all evaporate because of your, relationship with your mom. And you kind of help her out and you say, I'm just going to go to P.F. Chang and get some food. You just sit here on the sofa, watch a good movie. That despite your desire to run away, there is something about you that says, stay put. This emotion will pass. You'll go back to the living room. You'll have a nice dinner with your mom and things will go back to normal. So after 6 or 7 years of Ouspensky hanging out with Gurdjieff comes to, it's okay. I just like to step on other people's things. Gurdjieff comes to realize that Ouspensky perhaps has not been pushed enough. So he tells him that he has to make a decision in the next couple of weeks. You either stay with me and continue with the journey, or you will leave. And that's what good teachers do. They usually give you an ultimatum, because Their time is valuable, and so they don't want to waste it. And eventually Ouspensky leaves, and that's one of the difficulties with having male students. Men are strange animals. They never make good students. They don't make good teachers, but they certainly don't make good students. Because there is something about the way men have been wired where they want to shine, they enjoy attention, they enjoy fame, they enjoy power. And they don't really know how to be passive when they have a lot of power, so they don't get drunk by the power given to them. So eventually Ouspensky goes around telling his own students that they should never go to Gurdjieff, they should never listen to him because Gurdjieff is poison. So the very man who fed him for 7 years, fed him physically, fed him emotionally, fed him intellectually, fed him spiritually, now in the eyes of Ouspensky becomes evil. That's how men operate. But despite, all of his callousness, Ouspensky said some nice things and definitely wrote some nice things. What we know of Gurdjieff has been given to us by Ouspensky in a book called In Search of the Miraculous. For those of you who are interested, you should write it down in your memory. In Search of the Miraculous by PD Ouspensky. You can buy it on Amazon for maybe $5, $6, $10, which means you should buy it. It's a really, really good book. It'll protect you later on in life when you realize that you've been a scumbag most of your life and it's time to change. The book will come in handy. So he wrote this book called The Strange Life of Ivan Osokin. Osokin is a young kid who thinks he knows how to live his life, who thinks he knows who he is, who thinks he knows what is best for him. And so when you assume that you know and you just begin to participate and engage in life, whether you want to or not, you're going to create some habits. Habits in your body, habits in the way you feel things, habits in the way you think about things, and especially habits in the way you interpret things and project things. So if you pay close attention to the people you have dated, for example, you realize that they all have this common denominator. They're all like emotional, or they're all intellectual, or they all come from a broken past, or whatever the case may be. And that becomes a habit. If you have been depressed for 5, 10, 15, 20 years of your life, hello, please, it's okay. So habits. Ivan Osokin is a guy who is addicted to his habits. And he was in the military, he served his time, he had a girlfriend named Zenaida, but she left him, or at least he thought that she would leave him, so he just left. And there comes a point where he just wakes up, like all of us in this class. You just wake up one morning and you say, you have a nice house, you have a nice life, you're taking this great class, Humanities 30 Ethics at Laney College, taught by this beautiful man named Amir. Everything about your life is great. But you wake up and you say, I don't know what is wrong with me. The sun is out, There is not a cloud in the sky, and yet my life seems and feels so gloomy. It's not raining, but it feels as if it's pouring in your room. You want to get yourself up and walk around and you ask yourself, why? Where am I to go? What am I to do? You pick up your cell phone and you look at your contacts and you want to call your best friend and you say, talk to him about what exactly? And all of a sudden something about you has opened up and you don't really know why. And that's one of the strange things about moods, they just come upon you. I haven't seen her for, I don't know, almost 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months. Once in a while I think and say, I wonder where she is. I wonder how she's doing. And whenever I pass by the highway and there are these tents, I say, oh, maybe she's in one of the... And so, I don't know, maybe for the past few weeks, she's been thinking about dropping by with a box of morning buns from La Farine and to say hello and, pass out some pastries. Or maybe she wasn't really thinking about coming to class. She wakes up one morning and she says, I feel homesick. I just don't know where my home is. I don't know why I feel homesick. I have a home, a nice life. It's just not enough. I feel as if I failed myself. And that's Osokin. He wakes up in a very strange mood. And he says, maybe I should just go for a walk and see if I can find someone interesting who has a certain presence where I can look into his or her eyes and find a home there. And that home creates comfort and stability and intimacy. And then I can look at this person and say, I have a question. And it's not going to be a question about finance. It's not going to be a question about economics. It's not going to be a question about where did you buy these pastries. It's not going to be a question about, oh, I'm sorry, I'm late. Did I miss anything important? No. And so Osokin finds this man. And this man goes by a very simple name, yet very layered. He just goes by the name the magician. Magicians are interesting, They have something, they do things. It looks so simple, and yet you have no idea how they do it. And what magicians do, good magicians, whether you're talking about Jesus Christ or someone you watch on America Got Talent, they create the sense of mystery inside you. They create awe, they create curiosity. And that sense of awe and curiosity connects you to a world that frightens you, scares you, and yet you enjoy it very much because you're no longer dealing with the world of tables and chairs, things that things that you can see. You begin to kind of exercise your faculty, your mental faculty, to figure out how the hell did he or she just do this? Out of thin air comes this flower. That's who the magician is. Now, the other thing about the magician you need to understand, this particular magician in Osokin's story is that as he's rambling on and on and on, Osokin, this young kid, all of a sudden he's gripped by this sudden feeling. I've been here before, and I've talked to this guy before. How is that possible? Like when you're 10, you walk around, and all of a sudden, despite all of being with your friends and you guys are all having fun, you kind of just stop running and you say, the hell am I doing pursuing this? Maybe I should just go back home, go to my room and turn off the lights and cry. Or maybe read a book. And then you say, hell with it. You just follow your friends and you run. And then at the age of 15 again, as you're in the classroom taking notes, then you stop yourself, what the hell am I taking notes? This stuff is just rubbish. Why am I wasting my time with this? Maybe I should just go home, go to my room, turn off the lights and read the Bible. And then you say, wait a minute. I asked the very same question when I was 10. Hello. And then now most of you are 18, 19, 20. Maybe you come here with your dog. Maybe you come here dogless, but it's really irrelevant. You're doing whatever it is that you're doing in your life, and then you stop yourself saying, what the hell am I doing? Maybe I should just walk away from the class, go to my room and turn off the lights and do something. And so the point is, all of us have no choice but always go back home to the very simple, basic, frightening questions we ask. Why am I here? Is there a purpose? And the problem with Osokin coming to realize that he's been at this magician's house and it's the same old man with the same cane, with the same cat. He says, wait a minute, have I been here before? I don't think you guys understand, appreciate. Do you, David? You know, you're 15, you go out with a guy who drinks and smokes. Then you're with him for 5 years, you realize it was a mistake. You take a break, you date again, you go end up with this guy who drinks and smokes. But now he drinks and smokes and tells you what the Bible says. And then you realize, well, that's not working out too well for you. Then you take a break, then you go out with someone else at the age of 35. Well, he doesn't drink or smoke, he just watches porn. And then he tells you, what the Bible says. And then at the age of 40, you sit back and you say, my God, I've read all these self-help books. I thought I, sit in my room and meditate, and I'm to some extent self-realized and actualized. And when I go back in life, I realize all the people I've ever been interested in, they're just damaged. There's just something wrong with them. And then you realize nothing about you has ever changed. You've never evolved. You've never matured. You've never grown. And that's a really awful place to be. Osokin, at the age of 30, 40, 50, 60, thinking that because he's read a lot of books, because he's given a lot of sermons, because he has a PhD, because he's married, has a wife or a husband or 50 children, all that stuff, that he's a changed man or a changed human being, only to realize, no, nothing about him has changed. And he's been doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So, he looks at this magician and says, I really, really want to change. I can't do this groundhog anymore. Since you're a magician, can you send me back in time? Let me change some things in my life. And if I can change just one thing, everything will change. And the magician says, of course I can. I can send you back in time. But nothing's going to change. Do you come to class late? Do you know that you should come to class on time? Is that a good piece of knowledge for you to have? The answer is yes. I didn't say act on the knowledge. That's a good piece of knowledge you should have, that you should come to class on time. And that's what the magician tells Osokin. You have all the knowledge necessary inside you. You understand your life really, really, really well. Even your desire to change. But here's the thing. Just because you know that you need to change, it doesn't mean that you know how to change. Imagine for a moment that I had the power to reveal to you how absurd your life is. how stupid, childish, empty, infantile your life is. And imagine for a moment that you were open and receptive enough to embrace that. And then this class is over in about an hour or so. Try to remember that, how absurd and ridiculous and small your life really is. Now, what is in your life? Your goals, your hopes, your companions, all the things you want to do and all the things you've ever done. Add to it some more. When you go out with your friends, what do? You talk about your past. Maybe you seek a therapist. Or maybe you are seeing a therapist. Why? Because you have these emotional things inside you and you want to figure out what the hell they are and what they mean and how they impact you and why they impact in such a way. But then as you walk out of the class, you say to yourself, my life is really quite small and pathetic and infantile and meaningless. Why go to a therapist? My life is meaningless. Why do I make my emotions, why do I make them so important? Important enough to give someone $100 an hour so I can talk about who and what I am and how great I am. And I need my life to be fixed. The magician does something really strange to Osokin. He says nothing in his life really matters. Where he's going, where he went, all the things he feels, nothing. And just because now he has this information that his life is small, he can actually take this insight into life and inject it into various places every time he wants to do something, every time he wants to feel something, every time he wants to think about something. Don't forget, inject it. You are not important. What is that going to do? It's going to get you really depressed. Next time you want to raise your hand and ask a question. I've been in this business for 30 years. I've heard a lot of questions. There are no questions that are new to me. Your question is an old question. It may be new for you. It's really old for me. So next time you want to raise your hand and ask a question, and you feel really proud of asking that particular question, know this. It's only interesting for you. I've heard it before. And so when I hear your question, it bores me. It doesn't excite me. It burdens me. If you have that knowledge inside you, the next time your hand goes up to ask a question, you will immediately put it down. Because I don't find your question interesting. And what the magician wants to tell Osokin is the following. If any of you have any insights that are honest and sincere about yourselves and about your life, you will do the best you can to forget it. If you have seen something about your mom, about your dad, about yourself, about your companion that you don't like, if there is something about your life that's troublesome, and you know it's a very, very core issue, you're never going to hold on to it for too long. You know why? Because it's going to interrupt, disrupt, destroy your conversation with your companion, the way you look at him or her, and the future the two of you may or may not have. And the point that the mission tells all of us is that honesty, insight, is really difficult to carry all the time because it burdens us. But just imagine for a moment that you are able to carry this heavy burden of truth about yourself and your life and the other people who live inside your life. What are you going to do with this insight? You know, yesterday I went to Lucky's, hoping to get lucky, finding chocolate chip cookies. Oh, no, don't think like that, you guys. No. I'm too old to think about going to Lucky's to get lucky. So I got some ingredients. Then I looked at the back of Nestle's chocolate chip in hopes of being able to make some cookies, and I realized I'm really incompetent. I have all the ingredients, I just don't know how to put them together. So I yelled, "Wife, I need help." And the point I'm trying to make is the following. The magician tells Osokin that you may know a lot of things, but you may not be able to do a goddamn thing about anything. Because you just need a different kind of knowledge to bring knowledge to life. And so, magician calls the life of all human beings as Groundhog Day. You do the same thing over and over and over again. Do you guys not think that our good friend over there has always desired to come to class on time? Of course he has, because he knows that his grade depends on it. He just doesn't have the will. He doesn't have the desire or the interest. He's lazy. He's privileged. He's entitled. He's an ass. Yeah. No. It's just a scenario. It's not about you. Well, I should say I'm going to give you extra credit because you're a good material for this class. I apologize if it bothers you, but it's also good because it gives you material to work with. And so, what all of us in this class desire is change. And change is something that gives us hope, optimism. And the magician tells us, just because you desire change, it doesn't mean that change is going to happen. I find it interesting.